What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, excited to have you guys here. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday. It's pretty interesting as you get older, as you get more into business and entrepreneurship and real estate, the gifts just start changing. Every year, I feel like I'm getting different types of gifts, and it really hit an interesting moment when I opened up a big box that my wife Christina got me for Christmas, and it was a filing cabinet, and I was just full of excitement. And that's how you know that you really have made it to new heights. And it's also a telltale sign that she thinks my office is messy and I need to organize it. So it was great. I opened up a nice filing cabinet. Also, if you're watching on the live stream, or not the live stream, the video, I got this beautiful rosary. As I say all the time, pray the rosary, buy real estate, right? So I got to continue to keep up with it here. My wife got me this beautiful rosary, and it's actually like a replica of the rosaries that soldiers used to carry during World War I, which is awesome. And it's in gunmetal, like color. That was the color that it came with, and it's dense. It's very dense. It's very heavy. It's got a miraculous medal on here. It's also got Saint Benedict and Saint Joseph. So it is awesome. I am very excited to pray with it. I'm very excited to have it. And we're going to continue to pray the rosary, and we're going to continue to buy real estate in 2025. So I hope that you guys had a great Christmas. And it was really one of those moments for me too, where like, you know, my daughter Bernadette, she's a little over one. She's 13 months now. Last year, she just really like didn't know too much about Christmas and what was going on. She was only like 5 weeks old, right? She was kind of just like there experiencing it. And now she's really at this point where like she's really into it, and she kind of gets an idea of what's happening. And she loves Snow White right now. We got her a ton of Snow White toys and stuff. She's also really into the Nutcracker, which is pretty ironic because my wife Christina was a professional ballet dancer and a ballet instructor before she's now the top tier homemaker. But she, you know, used to dance in the Nutcracker, and she was the director of the Nutcracker when she was at her old dance studio. So the fact that Christina was all a part of that, and now Bernadette loves it, and we took her to see the Nutcracker last week, and she was obsessed with it, is really, really funny. We got her like a nice little Nutcracker decoration and a Clara ornament. If you know the Nutcracker, you know what I'm talking about. But it was really cool. Had a great time with my parents, had a great time at the in-laws, and it was just a beautiful Christmas. And I had one other really funny thing happen. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you heard about this. I got this book in the mail, Main Street Millionaire from Cody Sanchez. And we came back on Christmas Eve, and I saw this package, and it had my name on it. And I was thinking, oh, it's probably like one of these gifts that I ordered last minute for, you know, Christina or Bernadette. I'm going to have to wrap it. And it was like 12 o'clock. Christina had already finished all of her wrapping. She was up in bed. And I opened this package, and it's this book. And I'm like, I text Christina, I'm like, did you forget to wrap this for me? And she was like, no, I didn't get you that. And I'm like, who got me this book? And we had Secret Santa on Christmas and Christmas Eve, and nobody got me this book. So if you got me this book, and I know a couple episodes ago I was saying that all I want for Christmas is books nowadays and like rosaries. If you got me this book, please reveal yourself. If you are my Secret Santa, please reveal yourself, because I am so interested to know who sent this to me. And maybe it's just a sign that I need to read it. And my partner and I were actually recently talking about diversifying a little bit in our portfolio, buying maybe a laundromat or a car wash or something. So maybe it's just one of those signs that this is a book I got to read in 2025. But if you bought this book for me, if you are my Secret Santa, please, please, please reveal yourself, because I'm absolutely interested to know. And I appreciate you. I just want to say I appreciate you for getting it for me. So it was a great Christmas. I hope that you guys had one as well and had a happy holidays. Last thing I'll say, I dropped an episode on Christmas, the Frankie D'Astoli Show, called Spiritual Poverty, the Birth of Jesus Christ. It is an episode that focuses on the visions of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, on the nativity, on the birth of our Lord and Savior. So if you are interested in hearing more about that kind of, you know, faith-based stuff that I love and continue to talk about, that is an episode that is completely faith-based. We go through the nativity, we go through her visions. We break down what the Holy Family went through and how we could take away from that, you know, some very, very valuable lessons, and really just a great dynamic between Mary and Joseph, of how a husband and a wife and, you know, future parents act with one another. It was just, I loved making that episode. I find that stuff so interesting. And I think in today's world, all of us need to grow closer with God and get right with God and grow closer to Christ. So I hope that you go back and listen to that episode. And if you did listen to it, I would love your feedback. I would love to know if you would like to hear more about that stuff and more episodes that are focused on really strictly on the faith-based stuff. But today's episode is going to be really focused on real estate. So as we're getting to the end of 2024 and moving into 2025, I was debating on what my last few episodes of 2024 are going to be about. And today, I'm going to focus on a handful of my deals that I've personally closed this year, and I'm going to be breaking them down. Now, when we break them down, we're going to talk a lot about numbers, so this is going to be a little bit more of a mathematical episode. Now, if you're driving or you're busy and you're doing something and you don't necessarily have time to write things down, please don't worry. Just let this kind of flow over you. If you're an experienced investor, a lot of this stuff is probably going to sound relatively, relevant and natural to you. If you are newer, it might be brand new, so please don't feel like you need to capture everything that I'm saying. But we are going to get into some math with some of these deals. I'm going to talk about the deal math. I'm going to talk about how we found the deal, how we funded the deal, what type of exit strategy we used, the rent part of it, the reno part of it, stuff along those lines. And a lot of it is going to be good, right? We're going to talk about a lot of the highlights today. But the next episode of the Frankie D'Astoli Show is going to be about the low points, right? We're going to talk about the mistakes. We're going to talk about kind of like the pitfalls and the crazy chaos that came about this. And I'll touch a little bit on some of that in today's episode. But mainly, I'm going to be reflecting on some of these deals. And I really want to pull actionable advice for you guys out of these deals. And what you're going to notice is when I invest personally, I invest mainly for cash flow. So I do what's called the Brrrr method, right? And I wholesale, as you guys have said in my first episode, Frat Started a Father, how I got my start in real estate investing using the wholesaling. I still wholesale to this day. I've house hacked deals as well. But my main engine, the main engine that brings money to me every single month, that I'm basing my portfolio growth on, that I'm basing my generational wealth on, and my financial freedom on, is what's called the Brrrr method. The Brrrr method stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat, right? And that's really the mechanism of it. You buy the properties at a discounted price, you renovate them to force appreciation, to force value add, you rent them out to a tenant so you have cash flow coming in, and then you refinance on it. Now, refinance, and for anybody that's not necessarily in real estate, this is probably going to be the more trickier part to pick up on, but refinance it pretty much means this. If I have a current loan amount of $100,000, when I refinance my property, I am getting a new loan to replace that old loan. That's the way that you want to think about it. Now, that new loan is based on the value of my property. So if the value of my property is $200,000 and I have an old loan for $100,000, when I go to refinance on my property, I'm going to be able to pay off that old loan, and I'll have extra money that I could use, that I can capture, and it's tax-free money because it's equity built in the house, and that's called a cash out refinance. So a straight refinance doesn't mean that I pull any of the equity out, right? And again, the equity, not to get too in the weeds, the equity is the difference between what the home is worth and what I owe on the property. So again, if my home is worth $200,000 and I owe $100,000, I have $100,000 in equity on that property. When I go to refinance it, the bank is going to pay off my old loan. They're going to give me a new loan. And if I do a straight refinance, that's where it ends. But if I do a cash out refinance, I'm also going to be able to take some of that equity out. And at that point, I could do a handful of things with it, right? I could use it to buy more properties, which is the last R of the Brrrr method. It stands for repeat. I could use it to go on a vacation. I could use it to, buy, a car. I could do anything that I really want with it, right? It's my money because it's my house and it's equity that I have in the home. So again, not to get too in the weeds, but that is the main mechanism that I use. That is the main engine that I and my partner use at D&D Equities to grow our portfolio, to scale our portfolio. And we look at 2024, my partner and I, we bought 15 properties in 2024. And the first one that we bought was actually in April. We had a late start. So we pretty much in 8 months bought 15 houses. And I ended up buying a new primary house. So in 8 months, I bought 16 homes. And it's kind of the way that this happens is because of the Brrrr method, but it's a lot of the actionable items that I'm going to give you guys too that we were able to utilize. And the last thing I want to say, a little bit of a disclaimer, the way that I invest doesn't mean you need to invest this way also, right? Like I invest one way, my mentor, he invests completely different, right? We have two completely different real estate investing models on how we go about acquiring assets, not necessarily acquiring houses, but how we go about generating profits. But the way that we go about acquiring those assets is very much the same. You do a lot of the same targeting, methods. We, do a lot of the same types of, Brrrr methods on some of these deals. All this other stuff, a lot of that is the same. It's just the way that we invest is different, right? So I want you guys to imagine pretty much like a scale, right? Think of like a lawyer. Usually they'll have like one of those statues in their office of like, it's like a woman holding like a scale, and it's like on one side of the scale, there's one thing, and on the other side, it's the other, right? It's like a balance scale. So I want you to think about that. And I want you to think on one side is what's called cash flow. Cash flow is when you invest, cash flow puts money in your pocket every single month, right? So the easiest way for me to explain this is, let's just say you buy a house, you're going to use it as a rental. Your mortgage on that home, your payment, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is $1,000, and you rent it out to a tenant for $1,500. You are making a gross cash flow of $500. That $500 is going into your pocket every single month. It's tangible, meaning it's real. You could pull that money out once it's deposited. Once that tenant pays rent, you could take that $1,500 out. You could do whatever you want with it. That's one end of the scale. The other end, on the other side, is called appreciation. Now, appreciation is the increase in value of your home year over year, let's just say, for instance, right? So if your house is worth $100,000 and next year it's worth $120,000, congratulations, you made $20,000 in appreciation. Now, appreciation, however, isn't always tangible. Usually you need to do a cash out refinance, or you need to pull a home equity line of credit, or you need to sell the home in order to actually get that gain, right? In order to actually have tangible money in your pocket from that appreciation. Now, some investors will invest completely on one side or the other. Some will go into some really, rough areas where the homes don't have much monetary value, but it's a very high tenant population, and they will buy strictly for cash flow. They don't care if their house goes up in value. They might not even care if it goes down in value. If they're making money on the deal every single month with whatever their metrics are in cash flow, that's what they invest for. On the other side, you might have people that go into some really, really high value areas and buy these houses, and they just sit on them for years and wait for them to appreciate, and then they'll sell the home and they'll make their gain there. In some cases, those people might even pay money every single month. They might go buy a house, have a $5,000 mortgage payment on it where their tenant's only paying $4,000, and they might pay $1,000 every month, because if they maybe take a net loss of $12,000 every month because they have to cover that mortgage, but their home went up in value $60,000, they're able to recognize that $48,000 as a potential gain for them. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. Now, you could find a perfect balance. In a lot of markets, you'll find properties, most houses in general, are going to go up somewhat in value, and you might still be able to get some good cash flow on it, and that's a good balance for you. Here's the thing. Every investor is different. Every investor has different ways that they look at investing and how they plan on making money. Every investor's in different markets, and they might have to just kind of customize and jive a little bit with that particular market. So the point being in saying this is, the way that I invest, you don't need to invest the way I invest, right? And primarily, my partner and I, we mainly invest for cash flow. And there's a few reasons behind that. We have a vision for our portfolio to generate $20,000 in passive income every single month. And when we're at that $20,000 point, which we project to be there in about a year and a half, we are going to be able to just fully rely solely on the rents that come from our rentals. And that's how we focus a lot of the decisions. That's what we base a lot of the decisions that we make off of that. So for us, we find that we invest a little bit more for cash flow, because we want that passivity that it could bring, so that we are truly what's called financially independent through real estate, right? On other sides, again, it doesn't mean that that's the way you need to be. You can invest mainly for appreciation, or you could invest for a little bit more of a balance. We tend to focus a little bit on this. So we found a particular market where we could get into these properties for a lower price point that allows us to scale quickly and allows us to generate good cash flow, where our mortgage payments are lower and the rents are higher, so that we could reach that goal as quickly as we possibly can, right? That's why we invest in this particular area. Now, when you invest in for cash flow a little bit more, because you're investing more for cash flow, the values of these homes aren't going up as much. And when you have houses that aren't going up as much in value, you tend to not have, I don't want to necessarily say like not good people that are moving in there. That's not the case, but it's just, you're not going to get a lot more of that appreciation. You're not going to get more of that kind of like, those types of tenants that are moving in there that are going to totally change things. So all that to say is, we invest for cash flow with the hope of more appreciation in the future, but mainly we invest in the area for cash flow. And in this particular area that we invest in, one thing I want to make note too is, I meet with city officials, with councilmen, with, a bunch of people within the, city realms every single month to talk about what's going on in the city, so that I could find ways as an investor to add more value to eventually tap into having more of that appreciation on the back end, right? Now, again, I'm not saying this is the way that you need to invest. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a lens through how I operate. And you're going to hear with a lot of these, houses too, the lower price points, you're going to say, oh my gosh, like I want to go invest there because it's low price and because the barrier to entry is a little bit cheaper. I'm not suggesting this for everybody. I am a professional problem solver and a volunteer firefighter. And what I mean by that is, every single day I am getting phone calls from issues that we're dealing with tenants. In some cases, it's even extreme. I'm getting calls from contractors that they get held up at gunpoint at some properties. I'm getting calls from people asking for personal loans, right? Like it's a madhouse. It's crazy. And all of that to say, it doesn't mean that if you go invest anywhere else, you're not going to have problems. I promise you, you will. Every real estate investor has headaches that they deal with on a daily basis. Now, there's steps that you could put in place to help mitigate how those headaches get to you, but most of the time they still get to you, right? Even my mentor who invests in more affluent areas, who has different, investing models, he still has his own set of headaches. They just come in different forms, right? So all of that to say, as we go through these numbers, there's going to be a lot of times where it sounds like, man, like we're making a lot of money. And in some cases we are, but there's a lot of mistakes that cost us a lot of money as well. But I don't want that to be the reason that you guys try to find a market that like that I invest in to go invest. Because the way that I invest, it's what works for me. It's the life that I chose. It's the life that my partner and I live on a day-to-day basis. It's not the same life that everybody else wants to live. And even again, I relate it back to my mentor. My mentor doesn't want to invest the way I want to invest. And at this current moment where I am, I don't want to invest the way he wants to invest. I have the way that I do it. He has the way that he does it. And guess what? It works for both of us. And it can work for you in any capacity that you want to do it. And when we talk about all these deals that we're going to go through, you are going to get actionable items, actionable advice that you could use in any market, anywhere, for any properties. And I promise you that, I guarantee that. And I'm going to guarantee it so much that I'm even going to say this. If you all go to Dastoli'sDojoREI.com, you are going to see on my website that I am hosting a free class on how to acquire your next real estate deal for less than $200. I am literally going to show you how to become direct to seller and get deals under contract for less than $200, even $0. I'm going to show you, if you didn't even want to spend a dime out of your own pocket, how you could go find your next deal for $0. And you can do this in any single market. And I know this for a fact because I used to go do this in markets all over the world. I was in Alabama, Ohio, Texas, PA, New Jersey, Kentucky, Tennessee. I did it in all of these markets, and I know for a fact that it works. So I'm going to show you guys. Dastoli'sDojoREI.com. It's a free class. It's on January 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be about an hour long. I'm the one that's going to be running it, and you're going to get actionable advice that you could use and you could start working on immediately. I will show you how to do it up to $200. If you wanted to spend a little bit of money, make a little bit more damage, be a little bit more efficient, I will show you how to do it up to $200, and it's going to be everything that's below that. You're going to do it for as little as $0 if you wanted to. On top of that, I do offer mentorship programs and courses through Dastoli'sDojoREI.com. For anybody that's looking to grow a little bit more, for anybody that's looking to learn more in depth about particular investment strategies, for anybody that's looking to maybe jump into real estate more aggressively and buy their next property or scale their portfolio, I offer mentorships, I offer courses, and I'm giving for the holiday season 25% off. So if you use the code GIFT25, you could use it for any mentorship program or our course on wholesaling real estate as well. And also a portion of the proceeds, a portion of the money that you pay for those courses is going to go towards Good Counsel Homes, which is a foundation that helps homeless mothers and homeless children. It helps bring them in for shelter, clothe them, feed them, and help get back on their feet. So it'll be for a great cause as well. Dastoli'sDojoREI.com. Definitely take advantage of it. I hope to see you guys in the free class, and I hope that you join the dojo as well. Would love to have you as a student. But without further ado, we are going to get into this. So I'm going to talk about the first deal that my partner and I closed this year back in April. And as I mentioned, we do the Brrrr method. So keep that in mind as I go through the deal statistics. But this house listed on the market for $100,000, right? Which was overpriced. When I first saw it come out for $100,000, I didn't even look at it. But 4 days later, it dropped to $80,000. Now, this is an on-market deal. On-market, again, means that it's listed by a real estate agent. So we aren't direct to seller on this deal. I don't talk with the seller, I don't communicate with the seller, at least at first. So we see that it drops to $80,000. Now, that's a $20,000 cut, a 20% cut within 4 days. So what should that tell you? That should tell you that we have a motivated seller here. And even though he listed it for $100,000, and even now that he's dropping it to 80, it doesn't mean anything. And that's something you guys need to remember. When people list their properties on the MLS, when they list it with a real estate agent, it doesn't matter how much they list it for. I could list my house right now for $500,000. It's not worth $500,000, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I listed for. It doesn't matter what anybody listed for. So we listed it for 100, drops it to 80. That tells me that there's motivation. We book the appointment to go out to take a look at it. When we get out there, we meet the property manager, right? So the property manager's not the owner. He's just there. He's showing us the property, and it's in pretty bad shape. It needs a decent amount of work, but for the most part, it seems all cosmetic, right? It seems like the roof is good shape, the furnace, the hot water heater, the electrical looks relatively updated. There might have been some stuff that needed to be done still, but long story short, it was in good shape. It was mainly a cosmetic job. We end up asking the property manager a few questions that he didn't really have the details on. So something really awesome happened there. He ends up calling the seller. So he's calling the seller while we're in the appointment, and I end up asking if I could speak with the seller to ask him a few more questions. So he gives me his number. So when we leave the showing, we go back home and we call up the seller, right? And we're talking to him. And ultimately, I find out that his motivation is he needs $50,000 to put into his next investment deal. So I know that he's listed it for 100, he's dropped it to 80, but now I know the motivation. The motivation is he needs this money to put into another investment, and he needs 50 grand. So we start asking, well, what do you owe on the house? He doesn't owe a mortgage. He owes a little bit in back taxes because it's been vacant for about 2 years. So ultimately, what we come to the agreement is if we give him $58,000, he'll walk away with that 50 G's. And that's exactly what happened. I think on the actual HUD, when we closed it on the final statement, he walked away with like $49,500. So we shorted him about $500, but whatever, he'll get over it. But having said that, guys, that is basically a 40% cut from what this guy initially listed that property at. And it just goes to show, just because they listed at one price doesn't mean that that's what it's going to land on. Continue to pursue that. So we end up getting it under contract for $58,000. Now we end up financing this through hard money, right? So we don't have any private money at this point. We're not, savvy enough at this point where we're putting money down. We're not putting any money down on stuff like that. We go hard money, which we talked about on a couple episodes ago. All I want for Christmas is other people's money. If you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely recommend going back and listening to that one where we talk about, how to leverage other people's money to buy properties. So we use a hard money loan, a short-term loan on this deal. We ended up having to come to the table with a down payment of about $14,000. Now, I had pulled a home equity line of credit on one of my duplexes, which I had $30,000 that I could use as down payment. So I brought my share of that, my $7,000, to the down payment table out of that HELOC, out of that 30 grand. So that's how I ended up funding that. We end up closing on this deal. We have a $30,000 renovation budget, and it's all cosmetics. Like I mentioned, all the systems, the roof, everything's in pretty good shape. So we put a new kitchen in, we put a new bathroom in, we put new floors in, we put new paint. You're gonna have, if you're in some of these areas, you're gonna probably say $30,000 doesn't even get me to first base on some of my houses. Again, a lot of it is area specific. We're not putting in extremely high quality finishes and doing, all of these, beautiful luxury, things within the house. A lot of it is still very nice, good quality work, but these are for the most part going to be rentals for us. And we do what is deemed the most valuable in our area. We look at other houses, what they have, and we make our houses valuable compared to those houses. So just to say, where our renovation budgets come from. So we put $30,000 into it. Now, following the Brrrr method, we bought it for $58,000. We put $30,000 into it. At this point, we rented it out. We got a tenant that's going to pay $1,650 a month, which is great rent. We go for the refinance. Now, when we go for the refinance, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, here's where we're going to get a little bit of math, guys. What I mentioned in the beginning of this episode is when we go to do a refinance, we do what's called a cash out refinance so that we could tap into the equity that we built into the deal. How do we build equity in that deal? We built equity in this deal by adding value to it, by putting $30,000 worth of renovations to it. So we bought it for $58,000. We put $30,000 into it. We're all in for $88,000. When we go for that refinance, they send an appraiser out to appraise our house. Our house appraised for $155,000. Now, we get something that's called 75% loan to value. Again, this might sound like really crazy for some newbies. That's totally fine. Don't feel like you need to understand everything. But what that means is the bank is going to give us 75% of the value of our home. So if you take $155,000, I'm going to do it on my calculator as we walk through this. $155,000 times 75% is $116,250. So that's the new loan that the bank is giving us. They're going to give us a loan based off the $155,000 appraisal. And they're going to say, hey, because you got that $155,000 appraisal, we're going to give you up to $116,250 in a loan amount. Now, you subtract, because that new loan replaces the old loan, you subtract out the old loan. So that old loan is $88,000. And that gives us a total of $28,250. So that is $28,250 that we get to keep. We now get to keep that amount of money, but we have to subtract out some closing costs. So let's just subtract out about $7,000. We end up walking away with $21,250. So after about 3 months of doing this work, we made $21,250 after we put back, money from the down payment and all of that stuff. And now we also have a tenant in there that's paying $1,650 a month. Now that $1,650 a month, you need to subtract out what the payment, interest, taxes, and insurance is. And on that particular deal, our payment, interest, taxes, and insurance is about $910. So we make a gross cash flow amount of about $740 on that deal. if we put money aside for reserves, which we always do, we put about 25% aside for reserves, we make a net cash flow of about $555. Now, this sounds phenomenal to most people, right? Some people out there, you guys might be like, man, I'm making like $1,000 a month on these houses, and that's awesome. I hope that we end up getting into that realm one day. To other people, you might be like, I'm happy if I make $150 on my rentals, right? And again, it all depends on your strategy. It all depends. As I mentioned, we have a lot of problems. And when I talk about in the next episode, we're going to talk about a problem that happened after the refinance that costed us $15,000. And then we're also going to talk about bringing one of our tenants, that particular tenant, to court, which happened about 5 months later, right? So all these things to say, it all sounds great, but there's problems, and we definitely are going to be talking about that. Now, this particular deal was really, really awesome for us, though, because it actually led us to another deal. So when we bought this property, we noticed that there was a lockbox on the house next to it. And if you take anything from this, I want you to take this. If there's a lockbox on a house, it means one of two things. Or I should say it means one of three things. The one that's really irrelevant is you might have an owner who's possibly getting some work done on their property and they have a lockbox for their contractor to go in. That's a possibility, right? But usually it means one of these two. It means that the owner is interested in selling it and he's trying to show the property, or he's interested in renting it. And if he's interested in renting it, guess what? There's a chance that he might also be interested in selling it, right? So if you see a lockbox on the home, I suggest you skip trace that seller, which is exactly what we did in this case. So skip tracing means the art of finding out who the person is that owns that property. And you can do this through a variety of different platforms, which is all stuff that we'll talk about on the free class on January 2nd in D'Astoli's Dojo. But we skip trace this seller and we call him up. And I left him a voicemail, and he ends up calling me back the next day. And it turns out that he owns that house that's right next to ours. He owns the house right next to that one. And then he owns the house on the other side of the house that we also have. So now we have a chance. Oh, and on top of that, he owns one about 10 minutes down the road, another property. So he's got these 4 properties that are all on a portfolio loan. And if we end up finding a way to buy these, we're going to own half of the block, right? We'll own 4 out of pretty much 8 or 9 of those houses that are on that block. So we start talking with him about this deal, right? And he's got these 4 properties and he wants to sell the portfolio for $300,000. And to a lot of us out there, we're probably gonna be like, man, 300 grand for 4 houses, take that every single day. But what I'm gonna tell you is that is overpriced in where I'm buying some properties, right? So we just bought the house there on that block for $58,000. So he's pretty much valuing all these houses at about 75 to 80 grand. That's overvalued for me, right? I'm not in the business of paying what a property is worth or more than what it's worth. I need to get property at a discount, right? Like the very cliche but real saying of you make money on the buy, that's extremely true, right? If I buy a house overvalued, I'm going to lose money on that deal. So I need to buy these at a discount. So him wanting 300,000, valuing these at about 75 grand, that doesn't make sense for me. I can't do that deal. So we end up talking a little bit more. We're starting to try to negotiate, and it's not getting there, right? He comes down to like 290. It's just still not working. So we kind of have a little bit of a standstill. And I pretty much just like, hey man, listen, I appreciate it. Like, I really hope it works out. Hopefully we could just do a really good job on our deal and it adds value to your properties and we can make money that way for you, some way, shape or form, something like that. So about a week goes by and he ends up calling me back and he's just like, look, man, I want to find a way to make this happen. So I'm like, look, let's just go for coffee, right? Let's just go for coffee. Let's just see if like there's anything that we could do to make this work for each other. So we end up taking him to coffee. And what I find out is out of these 4 houses, 3 of them are vacant and 1 of them has a squatter. And he is pulling $1,700 a month out of his own pocket every single month to cover the mortgages. So he is in pain, right? There is motivation there. But what I also realize is that he has a little bit of like, it's not necessarily regret, but it's just a little bit more of like I don't even want to call it ego, but he just doesn't want to let it go. He doesn't want to lose money on the deal, right? He feels like this was something that he wanted to make work and he just couldn't. And he lives about an hour and a half from the properties. He doesn't have good contractors in the area. He's getting absolutely destroyed by a property management company that isn't doing their job. And it just has been a little bit of a wash for him, but he doesn't want to really let it go. So we're kind of at this point right now. We're like, look, man, we can't pay the price that you want, but you also aren't really capitalizing on this stuff. And we have what you need. We have the contracting crews. We have the property management in-house. We have everything that you possibly need to help get your portfolio up and running. And what you have is the real estate. So how could we marry these two things together? And what we ended up coming to an agreement on is that he was going to take the portfolio and he was going to refinance it, and he was going to start a new LLC where my partner and I are the primary owners of the LLC. And here's what the benefit is. By doing that, we get into these deals for $0 out of our own pocket, which is what we really want, right? We don't want to bring any money to the table. We actually tried to bring this to our private money lender before we even started working with our private money lender. And we brought this deal to him and he denied us. He was like, look, it's too big of a deal for our first one. Like, we're not able to do this. We need like a small house to start. You guys are asking for a little bit too much. So we were trying to find a way to get in this with no money in a pocket because we were strapped for cash. So by doing this, we are getting the real estate for free. And in return, we are bringing our contracting crews, we are bringing the property management, and we're going to make him a return. At this point, he's pretty much saying, I'm going to be a passive investor. Yeah, I just want to make a return from you guys, from the work that you guys are doing. And in return, I'm going to bring you in on the deal. And that is a great way to be creative that you guys should be doing. Now, what I will say on this is I brought my attorney involved in this, right? We did not like just say, hey, let's pull a, operating agreement off of, PDF filler or whatever it is, right? Or something like that and just make it. Like, no, we were back and forth with his attorney and my attorney for weeks on end, right? Like, it took probably about 45 days just to get a finalized operating agreement because there was so much work that needed to go into it. But once we had this all finalized, we ended up bringing this to a hard money lender. And the hard money lender took the values of the home. So we had, at that point, this investor had about a loan amount of $170,000. So he was refinancing with a loan of about $170,000. Now, these properties, however, they all came back at roughly about $300,000 in value. So they were worth about $300,000, but we were getting it at a price of $170,000. So think about how amazing that is and what that does for our valuations and the money that we could tap into on the back end. So we end up going to get a loan with the hard money lenders. We bring them this loan, it's valued at $300,000, but the loan amount that we have on it is $170,000. And we're going to put renovations. We throw a renovation budget into it. And long behold, we believe that the value of the portfolio is going to be worth about $665,000. And here's how we came up with this. Our house, at this point now, as we're going through all this, we got our appraisal back. It appraised for $155,000. So because we know that house appraised for $155,000, we have a really, really strong feeling and pretty much an insider information at that point that those other houses are also going to appraise for $155,000 when we go to refinance them. And at the point of making this video, this has already happened and they have all appraised for $155,000. So $155,000 times 3 is $465,000. Now we have that other house, that fourth property, and that property value is even higher. We believe at this point, we're in the process of renovating that home. We believe that house is going to be worth about $200,000, if not more when it's fixed up. But now we add $200,000 and we have a total loan amount a total portfolio value of $665,000. So we're getting this portfolio for $170,000. We're adding about $165,000 into the renovation budget on it, and it's going to be worth $665,000 on the back end. So I want to pause here for a minute because I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you guys. The value of these four properties are going to equal $665,000. We got them at $170,000. Think about that gap there. The middle gap now remains for renovation and for profit. The least amount of reno that we could put in and still get it to be worth that value equals more profit. If we need to add more renovation, it eats into that profit. But that's the margin now that we're working with, and that's how we look at how we're going to make money on this deal. So 3 of these appraised for $155,000. We expect that other one to appraise for $200,000. So total amount will be $665,000. Now here's where it got interesting. We were being brought in, right? My partner and I own 80% of the LLC. There's a reason behind that. My partner and I are personally guaranteeing the LLC. The current owner didn't want to guarantee it anymore. He wanted to be totally passive. So he ends up bringing the real estate. We end up bringing the experience. When we go to do the cash out refinance, we're going to get that 75% loan to value. The bank is going to lend us 75% of the value of the portfolio. So if you do $665,000 times 75%, you get $498,750. Now we have the total loan amount of the purchase of about $170 plus another like $165 in the renovation costs. So we're going to subtract those out from this $498,750. So if you subtract out the $170,000 minus another $165 in renovations, we're at about $163 roughly. Subtract out about another like $30,000 for closing costs, we're at about $133,750. In actual numbers, guys, it's really a little bit less than that. It's probably about $120. I think I might have missed like just a couple things in that calculation. But long and behold, we now have about $120,000 in equity that we're able to tap into. And part of the agreement that we came up with this investor is because he took on he got the properties under contract on the front end and he wanted to make a profit on this as quickly as possible. We're giving him 75% of that cash out money equity, right? So out of that 120,000, let's just call it, he's going to get 75% of that when we refinance. So he's going to get about $90,000, which is awesome return for him. And the beauty is it's tax-free money because it's equity. So if he sold the portfolio, he would have to pay capital gains. Now he's going to get this 90 grand in totally free money, not having to pay taxes. My partner and I are going to get about $25,000 to $30,000, but we're getting $25,000 to $30,000 over the course of about 5 months without bringing a dime into the deal. So we're getting 30 grand. It's an infinite return, and it's over the course of about 5 months. Now, here's the best thing for us, though. We are getting 80% of the net cash flow in perpetuity, where our other investor that brought the deal, he's getting 20%. So long story short, we're probably going to make about $2,500 a month in net cash flow on this deal. So every single month, my partner and I are going to take 80% of that. We're going to get about $2,000 every single month. So if you look at it this way, $2,000, let's just look at it over the course of a year, times 12 months is $24,000 plus $30,000 in the refi. We made $54,000 this year, and we didn't bring a dime to the table to make that money. And that's why this portfolio deal was one of the coolest deals. It's not our best deal number-wise, like when we look at our net cash flow and all that, it's not our greatest deal. But the fact that we were able to do it with no money out of pocket and we got creative in the way that we went about it is awesome. And here's another thing. Because we're delivering a return to this investor, he wants to invest with us more. So we're looking forward to getting, potentially some more equity from him to go put down on some bigger projects where we could bring him in on the deal and make him a passive investor also. So the moral of that story is we found that deal pretty much just by looking around to seeing what deals were available. We skipped trades, that's how we get a hold of him, but we didn't take no for an answer when it came to how to get this deal done, right? And this all relates to Rich Dad Poor Dad, which if you read that book, if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend reading. If you read it, you might want to read it again. There's a very, very, simple thing in there that says you got to change your mindset from I can't afford it to how can I afford it? And that's what this all boiled down to with this portfolio deal was, hey, I can't afford that $300,000, but how can I afford it? I could afford it by doing some sort of creative financing to make this deal go down. So I know that was a lot, that one in particular. If you guys have any questions, my Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI, please DM me. I'll answer any questions that you have around that. I want to move to another one, not as kind of cool and dynamic as that, but a very, very simple one that anyone can do in any single market. So we had this deal sent to us from a wholesaler, and they sent it to us for $65,000. They labeled it as a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Now, when my partner and I looked at it, it definitely could have been a 3-bedroom, but at that time it was only a 2-bedroom with a big kind of back open room where the utilities were also stored. So to us, it was 2 bedrooms as it currently sat in what you could actually rent to a tenant. However, we knew that we'd be able to flip it into a 3-bedroom. But because it was 2 bedrooms, guess what we did? We negotiated based off 2 bedrooms, right? So we went to the wholesaler and we said, hey, look, you're trying to sell a 3-bedroom, but really it's only a 2-bedroom. We need to buy it for 2-bedroom pricing. In actuality, I'd like to get this for 45, but we want to get a deal done. What do we got to do? And we came to an agreement at $55,000. So we ended up getting this deal for 55 grand. Now, it was a very light job. There wasn't much that needed. We put $25,000 worth of work into it, and we did all the stuff we normally do. We did a brand new kitchen, brand new bathroom, new flooring, new paint, and we put a wall up to make a 3rd bedroom. And that was the difference. That wall was more valuable than anything else we did to that property. Because we put that wall up with the door, with the right window and the closet in there, we now took the value of this home from going up to about $125,000 to $175,000. This $1,000 wall gave us $50,000 in equity. And this is one of those examples where you need to be looking for how do you add value as an investor, right? And like I said, I'm a professional problem solver. This is what I do all day, right? When I look at a house, I think about it as a problem. Why is this particular house not the same in value as the houses next to it? Well, is it because it's not as nice? Is it because it's not as big? Is it because it doesn't have as many bedrooms or as many bathrooms? And if I know the answer, I now know the solution. And in this particular case, it wasn't as valuable as the other properties on the block because it was a 2-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom. So how do I add it and how do I make that value so it is that? I add that bedroom, right? And that's exactly what my partner and I did. We went in there, we put that $1,000 wall up along with the other $24,000 that we spent in renovation. Our total loan amount on this was 80 grand. At this point now we did have our private money lender because we had a reputation, we had a portfolio, we had deals to show to him that we did, and now we wanted to invest. And now we had this $80,000 all-in loan amount, and it appraised for $175,000. Now you guys are getting good at this, right? So if it appraised for $175,000, how much is the bank going to give us LTV, loan to value? give us 75%, right? So 175,000 times 75% is 131,250, right? So $131,000, 250 is what the bank is going to give us. Our old loan amount is 80,000. So subtract out $80,000. That gives us 51,250. Subtract out about 6,000 in closing costs. I think it might have been a little bit more on this particular deal. That gives you 45,250. My partner and I actually walked away with about 41,000. So I'm off by about $4,000 there. But we walked away with $41,000 after about 3.5 months. And we also have it rented out to a Section 8 tenant. And our Section 8 tenant is paying $1,600 a month. And our mortgage on that is $1,006. So we're making roughly $600 in gross cash flow, probably about like 500 in net cash flow. And that particular deal, guys, was a deal that was very, very simple. It was a 2-bedroom. We added value by making it a 3-bedroom. 3 months later, we make $40,000, and now we have a Section 8 tenant in there where most of that rent's guaranteed, and now we're making a great cash flow on it, right? So this is something that could be done in any single market. Go find those deals that just they're different, right? Most people, if they saw it was a 2-bedroom, if it was labeled as a 2-bedroom, they wouldn't have even looked at it, right? Or if they walked in there, they might have said, this is a 2-bedroom. It's not a 3-bedroom. I'm not doing this deal. It's a lot less now, where we saw the value add. And that's what you need to be looking for as an investor. So that was one of my favorite deals personally. And now we even base a lot of our targeting off of that deal. We go direct to seller targeting for 2-bedroom properties that are over 1,100 square feet, because if it's over 1,100 square feet, we believe there is a small possibility that we can make it into a 3-bedroom, and we could add significant value by doing that again. So I'm going to talk about one last deal. This is not like the coolest deal by any stretch, but the more deals that you guys start putting together and the more deals that you start doing these things, you actually start expanding your reach. And what I mean by that is, like I said in the episode a couple episodes ago about raising money and getting into that private money and accessing family members. That's kind of where this all started to go, right? So I had a handful of family members that are my cousins, my brother-in-law. I love them to death. I want them to be successful. I want them to invest in real estate. I want them to go and strive for generational wealth while maintaining spiritual poverty, pray the rosary, buy real estate. I want them to do all those things that I'm doing. The difference is they don't live the life that I live. And what I mean by that is I do this full time, right? I'm in properties every single day. I read books day and night, right? I listen to real estate podcasts. I do all these things. And everybody that's here, whether you do this or not, you could do all those things. You could listen to podcasts just as you're listening to this podcast. You could read books. You could go link up with a real estate agent or an investor in your area and say, hey, can I walk property? But I also understand that a lot of people have full-time jobs. They have, demanding jobs. And they weren't always blessed to grab Rich Dad Poor Dad 4 years ago, read it, and have their life changed and start taking action on some of those things, right? So I always want to try to help and get other people involved. And this was a great deal. I had this deal sent to me from a wholesaler. He priced it at $65,000. It was a great deal. We bought it for $65,000. And it was on an awesome block. It's a really good block, a good up and coming block in that area. And we couldn't actually have our private money lender fund it. His funds were tied up in some other deals at this point. So we had to go hard money. And we had to bring about $11,000 to the closing table, which isn't a lot of money. But when you are scaling a portfolio, what you'll realize is like there's a lot of costs that are included in scaling a portfolio. And I think I'll make a whole separate video about this. But like you're going to have a lot of holding costs, right? So if you're buying a bunch of properties and they're not all renovated, and because they're not renovated, they're not rented, you're going to have high holding costs. You're going to have thousands of dollars coming out of your account every single month until you have that form of stability. And then at the same time, you're also still buying properties, which means you're going to have to send money into escrow. You're just need some liquid available at all times. So because we had this $11,000 that we needed to bring, we didn't want to bring it. So I pretty much brought this deal to my cousin and was just like, hey, look, like I got this deal. I know you want to get in real estate investing. I know you're a master plumber. You work a really demanding job. You have crazy hours. You aren't in a position where you could like go around and start looking for property all the time and like really kind of study this stuff. You're busy studying a lot of other things. Why don't you jump in on this deal with us, only if you want to, and you can give us the down payment money. We'll give you a 30% return on your money, which is something you're not going to find anywhere else besides real estate and maybe like energy. And you'll see kind of how the sausage is made, right? Like you'll see how we go about acquiring the deal, how we go about renovating it, how we go about finding a tenant, how we go about the refinance process. So that way you are pretty much like getting paid to learn and being able to offer these opportunities to family, to friends, and to be able to show them how it actually goes down and see if it's something that they want to do. And I could, help with that. It's kind of like one of those next level things that's just really, really awesome. And that's why I love my course, the dojo, right? Because like I get to work with people that are very, very interested in learning about real estate investing and continue to build and build generational wealth. But when you get to do it for family, it matters a lot more. So we were able to do that on this deal. He ended up bringing the $11,000 to the closing table. We're in the process of renovating that house right now. We're probably going to refinance it sometime in February. And at that point, he's going to get 30% return on his money. And he could do one of two things at that point. He could either reinvest it with us and we'll go buy another deal and he can make more money on it. And at that point, the velocity of money is going to make like 90% on his money over the course of the year if we go do that 2 more times. Or he could take what he's learned and he could go and buy his own property and start building his portfolio. And that was just, again, one of those deals where it ain't super flashy. It's not going to be like, oh my gosh, this was the craziest deal ever. But just where, again, I was creative. My partner, we were creative. We said, hey, we don't want to pay this 11 G's, right? We don't want to. We could use this money for other things. How can we raise it? We're at the same time bringing value to other people where they can make money and they can learn from it as well, which is really great. So all that to say, guys, this is personally just how I invest. Those are a few deals that I was reflecting on where I was saying, hey, those were really cool highlights of the year and highlights of those deals. Next episode, I'm going to tell you guys about the disasters that occur, right? And just to give you some context, like there are a lot of them, right? There was a ton that you learn during these processes. A lot of, silly mistakes that are made, a lot of serious mistakes that are made, a lot of those moments where you're just like, I don't want to keep going. But what you realize is the more that you hang on and you continue to push forward, the grass usually is always getting greener and greener on the other side. So I'm excited to break that down with you guys next episode where we talk about some of those pitfalls. We talk about some of those lessons learned. And I hope that you gained a lot from this. Again, the biggest thing that I want to talk about wasn't necessarily even so much to highlight some of these deals, but was to show you guys that these things are possible, and they're possible in any market, regardless of how you invest, regardless of where you invest. You could go find in these markets 2-bedroom houses that have the ability to be 3 bedrooms. You could go find in these markets landlords that are struggling with their portfolio that could use your assistance. You can go find in these markets motivated sellers on market or off market so that you could get these deals done. You could go find family members who need to make a return on their investment and are willing to invest in you. So I hope that you take that. Remember one thing. Pray the rosary, buy real estate, and I'm super excited to have you guys on the next one. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. Take care.